I know I'm gonna be okay.
Hey guys, I'm back again. How are you all doing? Finally, the film we've been waiting for is now available in HD quality. This time, we're going to discuss the newest movie that is said to be truly terrifying, and of course one you've been anticipating, titled HOKUM 2026. So, is this movie really going to be that scary? Or is it just overrated? Rather than keep guessing, let's just get straight into the discussion. And if you like this channel, don't forget to subscribe right away so you don't miss out on other interesting videos. The film opens with a talented writer named Bauman who is focused on finishing a novel. In the middle of a quiet house, Bauman is suddenly startled when a stack of firewood behind him unexpectedly rolls by itself. Instantly, Bauman jerks in shock as he briefly catches a glimpse of an old woman's figure. As if remembering something, he immediately checks the keepsakes left behind by his parents. It's unclear what exactly is happening. It turns out that Bauman's parents have long passed away, and their ashes are still neatly stored inside a jar. Feeling that this is the right moment, Bauman decides to go to Ireland to scatter his parents' ashes. This is where the story of HOKUM begins to unfold. Long story short, after a fairly long journey, Bauman finally arrives at Dull Hotel, an inn located in the Irish countryside. Upon arrival, Bauman immediately takes his belongings into the hotel. Meanwhile, inside the hotel, the owner named Brendan appears to be telling a legend about a witch who is said to roam the forest area around the inn. According to the story, the witch always kidnaps people with dirty hearts and then drags them to another realm to receive punishment for their deeds. ****. Upon hearing that terrifying tale, two kids named Randy and Ipeng look frightened, almost to the point of not daring to speak.
Don't talk to strangers again.
Upon arriving at the lobby, Bauman was immediately attended to by a receptionist named Peter. Peter apologized, explaining that instead of making guests feel comfortable, his boss and superior often scared visitors, especially children, with various myths and horror stories circulating in the area. After the check-in process was completed, Peter handed over the room key and asked Bauman to rest.
No. It's built to last.
Are you lost?
Seeing that Bauman looked a bit confused, an employee named Fiona immediately escorted him to the prepared room. Upon reaching the room, Bauman, who was planning to visit a specific location, asked Fiona about the whereabouts of that old tree. The next day, Bauman was seen arriving at a large tree in the countryside. He then opened a box containing the ashes of his late parents. Apparently, the main purpose of his trip to Ireland was to scatter their ashes at the historic tree that had once been his parents' favorite spot during their honeymoon. However, as if still holding some resentment toward his late father, Bauman scattered his father's ashes in a manner that seemed careless, almost like dumping ashes into an ashtray. Nevertheless, he still showed respect by leaving both ash jars at the same location. Long story short, Bauman was later seen relaxing at the hotel bar while sampling traditional Irish liquor. During a light conversation, Fiona asked why Bauman had come all the way to Ireland. While showing a photo of his mother, Bauman explained that his parents used to spend their honeymoons at that place. That was why he wanted to scatter their ashes at the location they loved most, underneath that historic old tree. Not only that, Bauman also wanted to stay in the room his parents had once occupied. However, Fiona explained that the honeymoon suite was no longer available to the public due to the hotel owner's policy. The room was considered haunted, and it was feared that keeping it open for guests would only harm the hotel's image. As her curiosity grew, Fiona asked about the cause of Bauman's parents' death. Although he seemed reluctant to discuss it, Bauman eventually revealed that his father and mother had been shot in the head by unknown assailants. In the middle of their conversation, a waiter named Aldi suddenly joined them. As one of the longtime employees at the hotel, Aldi claimed to have experienced a supernatural event that he thought was worth telling as a true story. Hearing the story, Bauman felt that it was all just made up to discourage guests from wanting to use the rooms on the honeymoon floor. Long story short, night grew later and the atmosphere began to feel quiet. After finishing her work, Fiona was surprised to see some of Bauman's belongings left behind. Shortly after, she intended to return those items. However, upon arriving at the room, Fiona felt confused because Bauman wouldn't open the door even after she knocked several times. Even though the action was actually against hotel rules, Fiona, who had begun to have a bad feeling, eventually asked Aldi to help open the room.
Fiona.
And this is where the big question arises. What exactly happened to Bauman that drove him to take such an extreme action? In his subconscious, Bauman actually felt confused when he found himself inside an elevator moving toward the honeymoon floor. As the saying goes, neither living nor dying, Bauman eventually managed to survive after going through that terrifying incident. A week later, after being declared recovered and his condition stable again, Bauman returned to the hotel to retrieve his belongings. After the police left the location, Bauman tried to lighten the mood with small talk and asked why the hotel looked like it was about to close. Peter then explained that every winter, the hotel temporarily ceased operations. After that, Peter immediately escorted Bauman to retrieve his belongings. Amid his curiosity, Bauman asked who the person was that had saved his life on the night of the incident. Peter then explained that the first people who found him were Fiona and a waiter named Aldi. Feeling that Bauman hadn't heard the latest news, Peter then revealed that Fiona had now been reported mysteriously missing after the Halloween party. Even now, the police still suspected a man living in the forest near the area as one of the parties that needed to be examined. Bauman's expression immediately changed upon learning that the person who had saved his life had now vanished without a trace. As he was about to leave the hotel, Peter remarked that if Bauman's only goal was to cause a stir at the hotel with his reckless act, he'd better not stay there again. Besides, since he failed to lose his life, the incident would surely be something embarrassing to remember for a lifetime. Especially because, since the incident occurred, their hotel rating had been dropping on Google Maps. Shortly after, Peter asked Bauman to leave immediately and get into his car. As the journey was about to begin, Bauman briefly remembered something that had happened before, trying to remember how Fiona had once helped him. Bauman felt that he owed a debt of gratitude that needed to be repaid. Because of that, he was determined to find out the whereabouts of Fiona, who had mysteriously disappeared.
Fuck.
Long story short, Bauman began searching for a man named Jerry, known as a homeless person who often wandered around the area. When they finally met, the scruffy-looking man immediately denied the accusations circulating about him. According to Jerry, Fiona was a friend who had often given him food. Therefore, he said, there was no way he would do anything bad to Fiona. However, Jerry admitted that he had seen Fiona's spirit, seemingly trying to give clues about her whereabouts. He then recounted that one night, as he was planning to return to the quiet hotel, his attention was suddenly drawn by the sound of a bell ringing continuously. Jerry was convinced that the sound was connected to Fiona's spirit. According to him, the source of that sound came from the honeymoon floor, which had long been closed. While revealing this, Jerry also showed an elevator key he had managed to steal. That night, he intended to check on Fiona's condition while the hotel was not in operation. As his curiosity grew, Bauman decided to join him. That night, they immediately put the plan into action. Upon arriving at the hotel, instead of immediately taking the elevator, Jerry changed his mind. He asked Bauman to wait for a moment. But unexpectedly, he ended up taking Bauman to the police station. After being taken to the police station, Bauman, already overcome with curiosity, eventually decided to continue the search alone toward the honeymoon floor. Upon arriving at the abandoned and eerie-looking floor, Bauman immediately began checking one of the rooms there. In the middle of his inspection, Bauman felt disgusted when he saw a bathtub filled with cloudy, foul-smelling water that appeared to be covered in grime. Believing that this room was the one once occupied by his late parents, Bauman eventually decided to rest there for a while. Not long after, he fell asleep and dreamed of his childhood. Whatever the meaning of that dream was, Bauman soon woke up when his presence was discovered by Peter. Strangely, Peter didn't show the slightest bit of anger. He simply asked Bauman to leave the place immediately. Seeing that Bauman was still confused, Peter looked nervous and hurriedly told him to walk ahead. According to Peter, the old building was very fragile and dangerous to occupy. But just as he was about to look inside the elevator, Bauman discovered a horrifying truth. It turned out that the person who had killed Fiona was Peter. Realizing his secret was exposed, Peter immediately fled and locked Bauman on the honeymoon floor. Now, Bauman was filled with fear because he was trapped on that floor alongside Fiona's decomposing body. So what exactly happened between Peter and Fiona? To find out the answer, the story then takes us back to the time of the Halloween party, or more precisely, one day after Fiona had saved Bauman. At that time, Peter invited Fiona to enjoy a dish of ginger shrimp he had prepared. However, it turned out Peter had another plan. After successfully rendering Fiona unconscious, he immediately took her to the long-abandoned honeymoon floor. After learning the chronology of Fiona's death, Bauman was surprised when he found a tape recording near the woman's body. In that recording, Fiona revealed that she was actually pregnant and wanted to hold Peter accountable. However, Peter, who was the hotel owner's son, had only been using her all along and had no intention of taking responsibility. As a result, after a fairly lengthy argument, Fiona never expected that Peter would do all of this, leaving her to die slowly in a pitch-dark room. At the end of the recording, Fiona pleaded with whoever found the tape to expose the crime that Peter had committed. Meanwhile, on the other side, Jerry, who had just regained consciousness, tried to escape from inside the car. Back to Bauman, after listening to Fiona's recording, he was shocked to realize that Fiona's body had suddenly disappeared. He had no idea what was actually happening. Not long after, a clown show that Bauman often watched as a child suddenly appeared on the television screen. This instantly made Bauman remember a dark event from his past. When he was little, a mischievous Bauman had been playing with a firearm. Accidentally, that action caused his mother to be shot in the head. After that tragic incident, his father, unable to bear the grief, ultimately chose to end his own life. It turned out that this was the event that had caused Bauman to suffer from depression to this day. A moment later, after examining the hotel map, Bauman discovered a route that could be used to get out of that floor. However, since the elevator's ground floor button was no longer functional, Bauman used an existing bell clock to press the button from a certain distance. After positioning the clock, Bauman immediately rushed into the elevator, hoping to escape from that terrifying place. Upon arriving at the lowest floor, Bauman was puzzled because the room resembled an ancient dungeon from the Dark Ages, more than a typical part of a hotel. After searching for a while, Bauman was shocked to discover that the exit shown on the map had been permanently sealed. Not long after, Bauman played Fiona's recording again. He was startled when, at the end of the recording, Fiona said that in that place there was a terrifying figure that was always watching her from behind the darkness.
I keep hearing something.
Hearing this confession, Bauman grew increasingly panicked and intended to return upstairs immediately, especially since the bell sound was about to ring. But in the midst of his panic, Bauman's attention was suddenly drawn to a wall on which a strange door had been drawn using chalk. Before he could investigate further, the alarm sound began to echo. A frightened Bauman immediately hurried away from that place. Fortunately, he still managed to save himself just in time. But the problem didn't stop there. In the midst of his panic and confusion, not knowing where else to go, Bauman suddenly remembered a silly technique he had once seen in the cartoon SpongeBob. Strangely, luck seemed to be on his side. The carelessly drawn chalk circle actually managed to prevent the eerie, witch-like figure from entering and crossing the circle's boundary. So, who exactly was the terrifying figure that kept stalking Bauman from behind the darkness? The next day, a curious Peter returned to the hotel to check on Bauman's condition. But upon arriving inside, Peter was immediately shocked to see many bloodstains scattered across various corners of the building. After checking, it turned out that the blood came from Jerry, who had suffered severe injuries after jumping out of the car. In a state of panic, Jerry begged Peter to help him save Bauman and also Fiona, who were on the honeymoon floor. But of course, Peter, who was the perpetrator behind Fiona's death, tried to divert Jerry's attention so he wouldn't find out what had really happened. Meanwhile, on the honeymoon floor, Bauman, who had just woken up, tried to confirm whether the terrifying figure that had appeared the night before was truly gone. Feeling that the situation was somewhat safer, Bauman tried to seek help by looking for a working bell button.
Fiona used to say, to get the...
She wants to. He hates me.
I live.
On the other side, after killing Jerry, Peter, afraid of running out of time, decided to immediately leave the place and let Bauman remain trapped on that floor. But when he arrived at the lobby area, Peter was annoyed because the gate key was not in its usual place. It turned out that after successfully taking the key, Bauman had hidden as soon as he heard Peter returning. As flames began to spread to various parts of the hotel, an increasingly panicked Peter immediately chased after Bauman. Meanwhile, Bauman again sought shelter inside the chalk circle he had drawn earlier, hoping that the simple object would still be able to protect him. Moments later, Peter, who had just arrived at the location, looked relieved when he found the elevator gate key hanging there. Absolutely insane. Like magic, everything happened so quickly. In an instant, Peter was already bound by mysterious chains. It turned out that the figure was indeed the witch that Brand had often talked about. Legend has it that the witch would drag souls filled with wickedness to be tortured in the realm of darkness as punishment for their deeds. Meanwhile, Bauman, who had long been haunted by guilt over his mother's death, could only surrender. He was convinced that his turn would come soon. But not long after, Bauman was visited by his mother's spirit. With great affection, his mother told him that Bauman, who was still a child at the time, was completely innocent. According to her, the biggest fault lay with his father, who had carelessly left a firearm within reach of a young child. Because of that, his mother asked Bauman to stop blaming himself for the tragic event that had passed. Shortly after, the curse that had been weighing on him seemed to disappear. His heart, which for years had been filled with guilt, finally felt clean. That was why Bauman managed to escape and return to the upper floor. On the other side, after Peter died, Fiona's body, which had previously seemed restless, now looked peaceful. The one who had taken her life finally received fitting retribution for all the evil deeds he had committed. Fortunately, Bauman was rescued by firefighters and locals who noticed the massive fire at the hotel. Some time later, while Bauman was still recovering, he received a visit from Aldi, who was now working as a traveling ice seller. While handing over a photo of Bauman's late mother, Aldi informed him that the police had successfully evacuated the bodies of Jerry and Fiona from the scene. However, Peter's body was mysteriously reported missing and was never found. After delivering the news, Aldi took his leave to return to his work. Since that incident, Bauman was finally able to forgive himself. He slowly rose up, made peace with his past, and began living his life without being constantly overshadowed by the guilt that had haunted him all this time. And with the end of Bauman's journey, the film officially comes to a close. What do you think? This movie was quite tense and held many mysteries that slowly unraveled until the very end. In the end, the legend about the witch turned out to be true. That figure would come to punish those with dirty hearts who had committed heinous acts. That's all for this movie discussion. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next interesting videos.